It's the Premium Pete Show.
Internets, welcome back to another episode of the Premium Pete Show. Sitting here with a good guy, a good fellow, okay? Entrepreneur. I want to say a trailblazer, too. Co-founder of Sir Kensingtons, the one and only Scott Norton. Scott, listen, I'm glad you're here for so many reasons. But first of all, one of the main reasons I'm glad you're here is because you are a game changer. And if for people listening who may not know what Sir Kensingtons is, right? Let's take it from the top. Explain to people what the hell Sir Kensingtons is. If they're listening, they're like, okay, what is that?
Oh, well, phenomenal. Thank you so much for hosting me. And
For sure.
Your words are too kind, Pete.
Sure.
And I have to say that, any degree of game changing that we've done has been a team effort. And it's such an honor and a pleasure to lead and co-lead that team.
Sure.
But Sir Kensington's, our mission is to bring integrity and charm to ordinary and overlooked food. And we're best known for making condiments with character. So it was about 10 years ago when we first had this realization that food in America was changing for the better. But condiments, and specifically ketchup, was really left behind. Everything in the supermarket was going organic. People were curious where things came from and what happened once they put them in their bodies.
Sure.
People more focused on the environment, more focused on wellness. And yet this quintessential American condiment, ketchup, resembled an industrial product more than it resembled a food product. And so Mark, my co-founder, and I, we began on this quest to see if we could make ketchup that was in line with the way that we wanted to eat and in line with the way that America wanted to eat. And one thing led to another, and we've grown that into a company. And you mentioned Sir Kensington, right? And so what the hell does this British guy that you can probably picture in your head have to do with this condiment and with food? And we created a character that represents our personalities, represents our values, and represents this quirk and this sense of history that we wanted to bring to it. And so Sir Kensington is he's a Victorian naturalist, and he's a spice trader, and he's totally fictitious.
So you made him up.
We made him up.
It's funny because, and I love stories like this, and we're going down the road of telling so many different stories like this, but they're all special and they're all one of a kind. Ketchup to anybody living, at least listening to this now. I mean, I don't know, maybe 200 years from now it could be different if they listen to this. Heinz ketchup.
Yep.
Nobody knows anything else except for Heinz ketchup.
Exactly.
Now, I want to go way back into you growing up, but for a second, let's take it where, how did that scare you to create a ketchup brand, knowing that, now don't get me wrong, I know there's Toyota, there's Nissan, and there's Chea, and I'm sure they weren't thinking like, hey, there's something else. But I feel like what you were saying, ketchup has been so longly led by Heinz ketchup. Has there been any competition for them over the years besides that?
There has been small competition that's came and went, and of course there are other brands that you'll see now, but there's no doubt that they have really defined the category, and so they've defined the category by taste, they've defined the category by packaging, and by price point, and so everything that you see in the supermarket is basically mimicking what Heinz is, right? They're copying the market leader, and I see businesses as fundamentally creative if you want to succeed, not fundamentally competitive. That's kind of big part of my philosophy. And what I saw was all these people trying to compete in ketchup with something they couldn't compete with. They could never be better than Heinz if they were going to just copy it and be like Heinz, only less so. And so we looked at other leaders and winners. I mean, you look at what Richard Branson has done with Virgin, right? And he finds categories that have not served customers well, that don't necessarily have that love or that special polish, and he reimagines them, And what we wanted to do is we said, okay, if we're going to make something better, we can't just be like Heinz, only less so. We can't just be like Heinz, but organic and kind of chunky. We actually had to be dramatically different to create instead of compete. And so we said, okay, when we launched, instead of being in plastic, let's be in glass, which is more premium and the language of this high-end European preserve. We said, instead of squeezing, let's be scooping. So we gave it a wide mouth jar, and we sort of suggested that it would be this thing that was dearly parceled out, teaspoon by teaspoon. And then we thought about, from a brand perspective, if Heinz is really Americana, like the roadside diner, like to your point, like anyone who knows ketchup knows Heinz, and it's ubiquitous in this country.
Sure.
Well, instead of American, why don't we be English, right? It's exotic, but it's not so exotic or snooty that it's like, French culinary. And so it feels familiar enough to people, but also has a little bit of a sense of discovery to it. And Sir Kensington is an explorer, and we really wanted to tell a story through what we were doing and allow people to excite that curiosity and have that element of fiction on top of it, but something that felt really true.
Where did these ideas come from? Like, meaning, like, was it a meeting, or was it you guys, like, where did these brainstorming sessions go on?
Man, it's hard to know like where good ideas come from, right? And that we were in college at the time when we first started thinking about this. And
where was that?
I was at Brown at the time, and when your brain is relaxed, you have good creative ideas. And I think that one of the challenges with creativity in business is that in business and most work environments, we're actually not resting our brains enough, and we're constantly either in like an urgency mode or like a check email mode. And it's hard to have long blocks of time to be creative and to just let ideas hit you. And it's really easy to see what competitors are doing or what consultants suggest and just copy that. But that's not really the route, to success. And so a lot of these ideas come, from seeing other great entrepreneurs and other great game changers and category killers, and kind of taking those lessons and adapting them to what we were doing.
Sure.
Like what Dyson did to the vacuum cleaner, completely reinventing it with industrial design, or like Branson did with so many different categories. And then there are great thinkers too, like Seth Godin is someone who wrote a fantastic book called The Purple Cow that talks about how being dramatically different, and making the product the marketing and making the product the promotion is how you need to compete and how you need to succeed in the era of an era where everyone pretty much already has what they need, right? And it was also recognizing that food nourishes us, but it also entertains us. And so when we think about like what ketchup's supposed to do and what food period is supposed to do, it's not just about, especially for our generation, which has become a generation in a society obsessed with food. It's not just about something that tastes exactly what you'd expect it to taste like and what you grew up with, and has that function of putting ketchup on food. There's a place for that, but also people are looking for something that expresses their identity, right? Food is more and more part of people's identity. It would be like a pair of sneakers or like a pair of jeans. And it also reflects someone's values, and it also reflects, how people want to gather around a table with their friends, with their loved ones, with their family, and bring those special moments to it. So that's kind of how that's really what led us to saying we need to be dramatically different, and we need to attract attention on shelf. If we don't have a big marketing budget or reputation, we got to catch people's eye.
So many people have ideas. Not many of them come to life. Okay, so, and we'll take it back to your childhood soon, because I want to go see where some of that stems from. But more importantly, to start a ketchup brand, because that's what you want to do from the beginning, not all because Sir Kensington now has over 20 different
over 25 products.
I mean, they got Chipotle mayonnaise.
Yep.
The
Fabonnaise, which is eggless mayo.
And we're going to get to that too, because of there's a story about that. But I mean, they have so many things. The Dijon mustard, the special sauce, and etc. But when you just started, how did you? You have these ideas, like you said. We make them in a glass jar, or but how did you find a manufacturer, or how did you even know who could put the labels out, or who could co-pack this, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about a project, or you're thinking about a business opportunity, it can be totally overwhelming to think about these details. And ideas are more or less a dime a dozen, and it's really execution that's worth anything to customers. or anyone involved really. And so I think what we did, and more or less accidentally, but my advocacy to anyone with an idea is at the beginning, set your sights on a milestone that's achievable and that's in the short term and that's small to see if it has legs. So we never set out at the very beginning. We never said, oh, we're going to start a ketchup company and launch from day one and be racing towards stores. We actually said, okay, first and foremost, let's even see if we could make one that's better and more interesting than Heinz, right? And so our first kind of project was creating various different ketchups, 6 different ketchups. Not saying anyone was the best, right? Not even favoring one in particular, but we threw a tasting party for 30 of our friends where they came and they did a blind tasting. They filled out a scorecard, and that allowed us to know, first of all, are any of these decent? And then which ones are actually compelling?
Were these honest friends? Do you feel like that they were going to give you their honest opinion?
Well, with friends, you always will get a lot of love. That's why we made it a blind tasting.
Oh, really? Okay.
So,
Okay.
So we didn't, we did have, Heinz in that tasting. We didn't tell anyone which one we liked, right? And so by putting them all out there are going to be ones that rise to the top and ones that go to the bottom. But that's another great piece of advice is, when you're thinking about starting something, it's important to test it on people that don't have a dog in the fight, right? That aren't just your homies. And also, it's important, even if they are your homies, you got to track whether or not they tell other people about it. Because if you have an idea and you tell them and then they go tell another friend about it, then you probably have something on your hands. But if they say, oh, that's awesome, and they don't do anything with it, unlikely that it's going to get any kind of viral success.
The name Malcolm Gladwell is a pretty big name, I think, in your journey.
Yes.
I think so. I don't know.
No,
Can you tell me the story?
Yeah. So in 2004, years before we started, Malcolm Gladwell wrote this seminal piece in the New Yorker called The Ketchup Conundrum. And in that, he posits that with the help of a researcher named Howard Moskowitz, that from a flavor perspective, Heinz is and can really be the only perfect ketchup. And he makes all these reasons and talks about why it's true in ketchup but not other food categories. And it's worth reading this article. And I'm a huge fan of Malcolm Gladwell. I've always really loved his books and how in particular he focuses on how what we think is true, it's often the contrary that's true. And it's the overlooked that needs to be reexamined. And I love that attitude of life, of like taking things that are taken for granted and then really putting a microscope on them and looking at them from various directions. Now, when we were getting started, this article was one of the references that we looked at. It wasn't the primary impetus, but it was something that we had in mind. And on the last night when we had done our tasting party, and we scheduled another party where we were going to bottle the ketchup by hand and put it into jars and sell it to our friends along with tickets to this party that we were throwing. And we stayed up super late at night. I think it was probably 11 p.m. or midnight. And I had this terrible toothache that I was putting off. And I said, finally, okay, I've got all the ketchups in the bottles. My tooth is killing me. I'm going to go to the infirmary and I'm going to get this checked out. And they gave me a prescription for a painkiller. And I'm walking down, in the middle of the night in Providence, Rhode Island to go to the pharmacy. And I see this kind of bouncy head of hair moving back and forth. And I realized, I think that's Malcolm Gladwell walking towards me. And this man and this woman next to her, they walk by me, and I stop him and I say, "Excuse me, are you Malcolm Gladwell?" And he goes, "Yes, I am." And I go, "Oh, I love your stuff, man." And I just keep moving. And then I think to myself, what the hell did I just do? This was an opportunity. I got to tell him about the ketchup. I got to invite him to the party. So the next day, I opened up my email, and I sent an email to 10 different email addresses that could be Malcolm Gladwell. So Malcolm Gladwell at yahoo.com, at google.com, this was back in 2008.
Sure,
so
AOL.
They're Hotmail in there. Went to his website, tried to guess his email, and 8 of them bounced, and I got one back. And he said, "Thanks for inviting me to the party. I'll be back in New York at that time, but I wish you the best of luck." And I've run into him a couple of times since then, but I would love to. And I'm a huge fan of his books, his podcasts, and the way that he thinks. So I want to spend some more time with him if I can.
Do you think he would be amazed to know what you did with a ketchup brand? I mean, even though I look at Sir Kensington's as more than a ketchup brand.
Sure.
But, I mean, it kind of went against the grain of what he wrote.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I'm so curious to talk to him, right? I mean...
Why? You should have fucking said it that day in the infirmary. You were on those
well,
painkillers.
but at the time, though, right, I didn't have anything to really talk about.
Sure,
I didn't
I
have
know,
any
I know.
success story. I didn't have any...
He would have been like, all right,
Yeah,
buddy.
he'd even like, I mean, I'm sure he was like, yeah, good luck with that. It's impossible. I just wrote about that in the New Yorker. But now, maybe we can revisit.
You guys you started off with ketchup.
Yep.
And when did you decide that you had to be more than ketchup? And more, this is two part of the question. And why?
So a lot of this has to do with how retailers really think, because as a brand that makes food, our gatekeepers to the actual eaters, to the people that will enjoy our products, are the retailers, and restaurants as well, but more so retailers. And in order to have a major presence and a focus, and for retailers to really care about you, you've got to have a certain scale to what you're doing so that it makes sense for them. And to just have two products, a spicy ketchup and a classic ketchup, we were never going to be someone that could really break through. In beverage, it's a little bit easier to do it, but in food, they want to be able to have a line of items. They want to be able to promote all at once and do displays for barbecue season. And they want to be able to take one meeting and have more opportunity in that one meeting. And so a big part of it was, how do we make sure that we're a better partner to our retailers? And also that there was very similar dynamics in the market for ketchup as there were for mayonnaise. So maybe it's not as extreme with Mayo in terms of brand strength, but again, it was products that were out there that were very well known, but there wasn't a lot of differentiation. In many cases, the Mayos out there had artificial preservatives in them and synthetic preservatives in them. So there was a clear opportunity to clean up the label and do something better. And we also love Mayo, and Mayo is something that, is classically this delicious French food that has in a lot of ways, like ketchup, fallen from grace.
Is it bigger than, not to cut you up, but is it bigger than ketchup mayonnaise?
It is indeed, yeah. Especially in grocery stores, Mayo is a bigger market than ketchup.
Yeah. So again,
which a lot of people are surprised by. Now, the majority of our sales are actually, in comparison to ketchup, are Mayo. So that's
crazy.
That's where. So that's another, I think, important lesson, is that what you start with, that might be where you get your credibility, and that's how your story begins, and that's where your reputation starts. But any business has the opportunity to innovate and to bring a new product to market that actually defines them, right? I mean, it took Apple, I don't know exactly, but roughly close to 30 years to come out with the iPhone,
sure.
Right? And now that company is the iPhone company, and everything revolves around the iPhone. And I think there are a lot of companies that have done like that. And I think for any entrepreneur out there, anyone who's starting a business or that has a business, always recognize that you may have not yet made your defining product. And that's a powerful motivating factor as a leader, and it's also a powerful motivating concept for your team, because it means that the sense of enormous possibility is all around the corner if you've got the imagination and you've got the drive.
You guys made vegan mayonnaise, which to me is unheard of. Like, what is vegan mayonnaise? And what I mean is, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys kind of were on the forefront of that with vegan mayonnaise, right?
Well, we definitely did some innovation in that space. The vegan mayo has been around for a while. Just to break it down, very simply in food terms, mayo is an emulsification of eggs and oil, right? So the oil is slowly whisked into the eggs to move it from just a liquid of oil to a fluffy, delicious texture. And eggs are used as an emulsifier to give it that texture. There are other emulsifiers that you can use that aren't eggs, they're typically like processed soy protein or pea protein. And one of the things we say at Sir Kensington's is if it's not food, it doesn't belong in our food. And we really try and think about our innovation process and our products as what would be in someone's home kitchen that they would actually put to use. That's the way that we think about delivering a minimally processed natural ingredient or natural product, is by thinking how a home chef, right, or a restaurant chef would. And the taste that you'd get also from these vegan mayos that were made with those proteins, they weren't up to par for us. They weren't as good as what we thought a classic mayo should taste like. And so they didn't deliver in the flavor, and the texture was a little bit off for us too, until we discovered this really interesting ingredient called aquafaba, which is Latin for bean water. And aquafaba, if you've ever opened up a can of garbanzo beans or chickpeas, you know that it's got this liquid in it that's a little bit viscous, and if you pour it down the drain, it kind of bubbles. And there's a community online of vegans that had discovered that it had these incredible emulsification properties. They were making meringues out of it, primarily icings, and other foods and other dishes that would traditionally use egg, but of course, because vegans don't eat egg, they were able to use this. And not only did it have this incredible property to it, but also it was something that in the home went to waste, because people typically wouldn't eat or drink the aquafaba. So it was a valuable thing that people were pouring down the drain. So we began our research and our work in the test kitchen. And after many different iterations, we found that we could make a mayo that had this perfect texture using aquafaba as the emulsifier, and using actually seaweed as something to give it a savory flavor, because egg yolks have a savory flavor, but aquafaba on its own, just like soy or pea protein, doesn't. And when it came time to think about how do we do this on a national scale, where the hell are you going to get aquafaba, right? Because you can't knock on people's doors and collect their chickpea remnants. And so with the help of Whole Foods, we actually were put in touch with a hummus manufacturer that was making hummus by boiling chickpeas, but then as a natural course, pouring the aquafaba down the drain after they boiled these chickpeas. And when we launched that product, we actually were able to upcycle aquafaba that would have gone to waste and rescue it and turn it into a food product that people can actually eat.
It's like a fucking science project over here.
I mean, science is definitely involved, right, to keep it safe, but ultimately it's a culinary project and a creative project on a big scale. Now we've actually moved away from that particular supplier as our scale has grown. But at the same time, I hope that every communication we have and every jar of Fabonets we sell, I love to think that there's education that we do on the side of that jar that helps people realize that you can actually use this thing that you used to throw away. Because food waste, I mean, estimates are up to 40% of food that gets produced in America is wasted. Up to 5% of our drinkable water ends up in landfills because of food waste in this country, right? And the food system is incredibly complex and powerful, and it's definitely imperfect. And so we try and think about, with our products and with the education, how do we move food forward and make a positive contribution there?
You started Sir Kensington's, you and your partner Mark. I mean, how long was it just you and him? Like, was it for a while before you hired somebody? Do you remember the first person you hired?
Well, at the very beginning, we actually had two other co-founders.
Really?
And there were four of us, and they ultimately never joined full time, and so we're never really that involved operationally, which is just kind of how things go. And early stages of a company, there's always it's always hard to know what people's are they in or are they out, or it's always hard to like take a bet on that and know if it makes sense to sort of devote your life's work to that.
Sure, because you don't know what it could be.
Yeah, you don't know what it could be at all. And it was a big leap for me too, to do it. And but Mark and I worked for the business in earnest for about a year until we hired a little more than a year until we hired our first employee. Yeah.
It's crazy because when you in this day and age, startups are like trendy, and there's so many different startups, and raising money is something that comes along with startups. And it's I just feel like there's some people who are really doing it or have done it well, and I consider Sir Kensingtons to be one of them. I mean, how do you even know, like, because mind you, you graduate, and I still want to go back to when you were young. We'll do that probably after the break, but you came from Brown University, right? Your parents probably, I mean, I don't know what they thought, but you're like, yeah, I'm going to start this ketchup brand. They're probably like, okay, like, because again, who knows what it could be?
For sure.
Right?
I mean, yeah, I think they thought it was a little bit crazy, but lucky for me, they definitely trusted me.
Yeah, they believed in you.
Yeah.
And I think that's all that it's a special thing that you could do for your kid, and sometimes we're very judgmental.
100%.
Believe in them. I know. It's sometimes I hear my mother or father, because our parents were very judgmental, when you look back, but I try not to. But not going off a case.
That's healthy that you're conscious of that. And that you're intentional about it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, there are a lot of people that just, continue the cycle and treat people how they were treated. And it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of awareness to change based on what your environment was.
Yeah. My daughter's friend's mother, we're in a nail salon one day, and she was telling me about her son, and she was like, I wish he would get a real job. And I was like, what does he do? And he's like, he's a DJ, but there's no money in DJing. And I said, I have friends that make about $10 million a year in DJing. What? How's that possible? Oh, it is. She said, well, I think he's going to go to Tokyo. Well, let him go. I guess just people are judgmental. And I mean, it happens to the best of people. But I just think that, it's funny. I'm still learning in life, as we all are.
We all are, yeah.
But if I could go back, I wouldn't want to go back. You know what I mean? Because it's like too scary and crazy. But if I could go back, I would probably fail a little bit more. Just because I think kids are so scared to fail today.
Yeah.
My daughter, I worry how she don't ever want to be wrong. I said, it's okay to be wrong. It'll help you get to be right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
right.
But I don't want to go off track. We were
But this
talking
is
about
the good stuff too.
Yeah, no, it is.
We should talk about
yeah,
that.
we will. We're gonna get to when we get back to you growing up in San Francisco, which has amazing food over there in San Francisco.
Phenomenal, yeah.
But startup, raising money.
Yeah.
What did you know about raising money?
Well, growing up in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley, I did have kind of a sense of it, right? And I grew up around the venture capital, venture-backed companies. By no means was an expert, but I did, from a very early age, I loved to build things. And
Like what?
If you like anything from
Legos?
skateboard ramps, tree houses, Legos, absolutely. Printing T-shirts, like all that kind of stuff. And what I realized was that if you like to make things, but you don't know how to sell things, then you end up with a lot of things, right? And you don't get those things out in culture. And so I understood from a fairly early age that you could marry creativity and commerce together to create this flywheel that influences culture and that creates the growth of your ideas and the growth of yourself. And so I did, I studied economics. So I did have kind of a sense for, I could speak the language of finance, and I understood, how to think about opportunities in a way that people could participate in them. And from up front, you knew as an entrepreneur what you were getting into, and they knew as an investor what they were getting into. And sort of thinking about the end game from the beginning and thinking about what is it that investors would be excited about, want to participate in, and also that a lot of people are afraid to raise money. They don't want to give up ownership. But the way I think about it is you want as many people, strategic people, invested in your success as possible.
For sure.
And so that was an important part of how we grew and how we got mentorship and how we got customers. So I think that and again, like we're we were first time entrepreneurs and founders doing this, and of course we made mistakes as well.
Do you remember some ones that were valuable that taught you some things?
In terms of mistakes,
Yeah.
Something really interesting that you brought up was like, if you could go back in your life, even if that would be crazy, was you'd fail more. And I think that we went for a couple of years, like, raising a little bit of money and, being pretty frugal with it and moving kind of slowly. And actually looking back on it, I think that while this isn't like a mistake, quote unquote, right? Because everything works out for a reason, but I think we probably would have had more conviction, and we probably would have gunned a little harder. And I think we would have failed a little bit bigger and a little bit more quickly, even if it meant we, raised more and burned through some more, because creating momentum is really important in this. So I think we would have probably done more faster. But again, that's, now having done it for a couple of years, you have a sense that you can take on more. But when you're just starting, you're learning, and it's like drinking from a fire hose. And then also we had a lot of individual investors, right? Angel investors. And that's how we were able to put the rounds together. But it's also a lot of people to manage, right?
Sure.
And I think it taught us that it's good to have, I think, in general, fewer, more powerful investors rather than a really broad, reach, just because it's a lot to manage. I mean, I love them all, but it's a lot of work. But what it taught us, and one of the things I really have to hand to my partner, Mark, about being so organized about this, is the thing that investors value most, potentially even more than performance, is communication. So on the dot, we were able to deliver at the end of every month, a month update of what's the company doing, what's the growth look like, what's the operations look like, a snapshot of the financials, updates, press we've gotten, what they can do to help. And I've invested in a couple of companies, and the biggest advice that I give them is, if you don't do anything else, communicate with all your investors on a timeline that they expect, and set yourself up for consistency, and keep them informed in good times and bad. Think of yourself as like a little publication for them, and they will have trust in you if you do that. Versus waiting a long time, sending a random update, and then asking for more money, or saying that something didn't go as planned. So I think that communication, that's a big lesson that we learned, is communication skills are leadership skills.
Definitely communication is key. You mentioned before that in your first year, I think you said you hired your first person to work with you. Today, 2018, how many employees are with Sir Kensingtons?
We have 35 people.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, it's an amazing team.
Listen, it takes a while to build something like that. When you hear one employee to 35, it's what makes the world go round.
Yeah,
Yeah. But I want to get to you growing up in San Francisco and a bunch of other stuff. Let's take a quick break. Internets, we're sitting here with the co-founder of Sir Kensington's, entrepreneur, definitely a condiment guru. Okay, Scott Norton. We'll be right back. Chea.
Hey, this is Josh Kesselman, the founder of Raw Rolling Papers, and you are listening to the one and only badass motherfucking Premium Pete Show.
Chea. Internets, and we're back sitting here with Scott Norton, co-founder, Sir Kensingtons. Listen, I said in the beginning of the episode I wanted to go back a little bit. You grew up in San Francisco. Mom and dad, you grew up with?
Yep.
What did mom do? What did dad do?
So my parents were filmmakers.
Really?
They were. My mother was a producer and my dad was a director. And they worked together.
Would they meet on like a film or something
They
like that?
met on a TV set, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they met at I think they met either at WJBZ in Boston or a station in Baltimore. And they traveled around the country setting up this show called PM Magazine. And they settled in San Francisco. And then when I was really young, we moved south to the peninsula, which is kind of now known as Silicon Valley. So I was born in San Francisco, but I really grew up on the peninsula.
Now, did they make any films that people would know or I would know?
No. They used to be in TV. And then they began to do really like TV, video, and storytelling on behalf of companies. So commercial films, but not consumer facing. They would do a lot in technology, in pharmaceuticals, life sciences, other big companies that want to communicate something internally or to shareholders or to regulators or sales forces, stuff like that. But it rubbed off on me a lot. So at my core, I'm a storyteller. And I think that, my parents, my mother was, I would say, the more entrepreneurial of the two, and my father was probably the more creative of the two. And so I got that sort of hustle from my mom, and I got the creative bent from my dad. And so, they would have camera equipment, and they would occasionally like have shoots in the house. And so I kind of grew up around it and picked up a camera when I was, early and maybe end of middle school, early high school. And I learned how to shoot. I learned how to edit. I learned Photoshop and Illustrator to do titles and After Effects. And I would make little movies, and I loved it. I adored it.
Now, did you want to do? Obviously, you just somewhat said it, but
Yeah.
did you want to do it because it was around the house? You weren't like, all right, no, that's just regular cameras they're doing, like, and go about your kid business, like, so because that's important what you say, not only for yourself, just knowing your journey, but more importantly for people even listening, like, to do that around their kids. You know what I mean? And necessarily doesn't have to be a camera.
Yeah.
It could be a piano. It could be whatever it could be. But that's powerful that what they had around doing their regular life job, their livelihood,
Yeah.
inspired you to kind of pick up, camera and
It
be
definitely
creative.
did. Yeah, it definitely did. And I also think, though, that, film and television video is cool. It's like being able to tell stories like that, being able to produce videos. I mean, I think some of the greatest cultural figures of our time are either directors, actors, producers, writers. And so I think that the storyteller has a really special place in society. And I think that what video represents is this intersection between storytelling that's super intimate and the scale of technology, which is incredibly powerful and broad. And this was way, way before YouTube, right? Or even before Facebook or anything like that. But I started as a kid taking a lot of photos at parties, taking pictures, because I didn't drink in high school. So I was always the designated driver, and I never had a drink in my hand, but I always had a camera in my hand. And I started putting up photos on my own website of parties, and people fell in love with it. They freaked out, because it was like this kind of intimate experience. It was behind closed doors. It was somewhat illicit, but at the time, the internet felt kind of private, right? Because this is before social media, and it was really interesting to see that grow. And actually, it was the first time that I really ever felt the power of the scale of media and storytelling, and feeling like I was kind of like at the center of this media world of my high school, which was pretty wild.
That's dope to hear. You think of a young kid that you were at that time to where you are now today.
Mm-hmm.
Is this where? I mean, is this where you pictured you be?
I had no idea. I had no idea where I would be. I think that growing up, I always, and this is probably an ego thing, but growing up, I always knew that I wanted to build something of significance, and I don't know if it was for like the recognition of others, because I don't think it was. I think it was like, we are living in such an incredible time to be alive, and I think that I have a lot of creative energy, and I wanted to channel that and to build something. And again, like, I love building something. I love the experience of learning something by building, and I want to encourage other people to do the same, because I think that we all have creativity in us, and we all have this creative energy and curiosity that actually the world needs, and that we can harness and we can put to work. So I had no idea where I would end up. Obviously, I certainly never thought I'd be in the food business or in the ketchup business. I did for a while think that I wanted to make movies. But now I'm kind of going back to recognizing that it's important for me to be in touch, actually, with my 15-year-old self and my
Really?
16. Yeah, absolutely.
So can we actually see some film maybe possible coming? Is that something that can happen?
We're thinking more and more at Sir Kensington's about how do we not produce just kind of marketing content to sell a product, but really marketing content to introduce our values and to introduce our mission and to tell a deeper story. And so definitely watch this space. We've got things in the works that I think could stand on their own as exciting entertainment and also bring people deeper into the world of food, bring people deeper into the entrepreneurial process, and be really hilarious at the same time.
You know, I think the Sir Kensington's character is starting to become more recognizable. You know, people may not say Sir Kensington's, or maybe they know of it, or maybe they don't know of it, but they definitely know the logo.
Yeah, what the guy looks like.
You know, it's funny because I think we're in a day and age where you want people, the brand identity, to be so important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my kid, even though I don't eat McDonald's anymore, we do get him Happy Meals and stuff but you know, if with apples and apple juice and etc. Loves a toy.
They've cleaned up a lot since I was a kid.
but when we drive by, he's 3 years old. McDonald's.
He knows it.
Quickly they know.
Yeah, they're
you know,
good
you
at
think
that.
about it. Toys R Us is amazing, and it's amazing that it's gone. But they never really marketed Jeffrey as they should have. And what I mean by that is that character could have been so much more.
Totally.
That character could have been like an Elmo.
Yeah.
That character could have been, you know, like I don't want to say Barney, but you know,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it could have been
Iconic.
yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
No.
You
yeah.
know, and the reason why I want to tell you this is even before Toys R Us was closing, about last year, I went into Toys R Us with my son, and Jeffrey was there, and it was just a big giraffe to him. He was like, "Who?" I mean, he was there, "Who the fuck is this?" Now he didn't tell me that. He didn't say,
Yeah.
you know. But honestly,
It was nothing special to him.
because where does he see him?
Right. Yeah. It wouldn't have been exposed to him.
Why wasn't there? There could have been a Jeffrey cartoon.
You got it. Yeah. And that is the brilliance, for instance, of the Disney business model or the George Lucas business model, right? George Lucas, when he sold 20th Century Fox, the concept for Star Wars, you know, he sold him the script and the rights to do these movies, but he held on to the merchandising rights. And that wasn't a big deal for them. But on top of that, he was able to create action figures and lunchboxes and Halloween costumes. And now that is actually bigger as a franchise than the entertainment properties themselves. But the important part is that it's a virtuous cycle. And when Disney bought Marvel, they recognized that, hey, here's this incredible storytelling, characters, intellectual property that aren't activated in theme parks. They're not activated in movies. They're not activated in music. They're not activated in all these places where they can be in merchandising and popular culture. And so when you put that into the Disney universe, the value is incredible. And so one of the really important flywheels of our business from day one was we made sure that the product was well represented in leading restaurants, partnering with chefs, so that it would create a place where people would really discover Sir Kensington's in the theater of food and know about it when they went to the grocery store. And you had a channel there that was creating visibility through these really authentic partnerships with great chefs. And that was creating awareness that was then building the sales in other channels. And you'd have working with, for instance, Whole Foods or working with Kroger gave us a legitimacy that a chef or a restaurant would know that people would actually be familiar with this, like it, have it in their home, and we could show them our rankings and our really strong sales to know that it wasn't some random thing that they were putting off on their customers. So in business, you want to find these virtuous cycles where there's a flywheel and one piece feeds another piece. And I think that in the entertainment business, they have really strong cycles built in with the characters, you know, Disney, for instance, George Lucas. And Amazon is known, again, famously for doing this and really being maniacal about it, of all the different components of the Amazon ecosystem feeding into each other. But you always want to look for opportunities in business where 1 + 1 = 3.
Explain that real quick. I know you just put it there, but 1 + 1 = 3. Explain that real quick.
Well, it means if we could think about the sales from one channel or from one line, if you only think of that as what is the sales benefit, right, that's created in terms of revenue, you're forgetting how much of a marketing halo it might create and how much of an association or reputation it might build for you that can actually be worth more to accomplish another goal of yours or to do something else in another channel. And so not all customers are created equal in terms of the reputation that they provide and not in terms of the visibility that they provide. So you want to find opportunities to kind of plug these different models in together, right? Whereas, like, for instance, like if George Lucas were to just create Luke Skywalker as a character to put on a lunchbox, no one would care,
Sure.
right? And if it was just the movie, then you wouldn't have the cultural relevance to create an opportunity with the lunchboxes and be able to 30 years later do another line of movies, because all the while it was still existing in culture, it was still existing in the physical world. Of course, the movies were great, but I think that these flywheels are really important to think about in business.
No, for sure. I want to go over, for people who's listening, Sir Kensington's the brand. We got let's go over everything.
Sure.
We got ketchup.
Yep.
We got spicy jalapeno ketchup.
Yep. Exactly.
We got go ahead. We got
I mean, there's a lot.
Let's
but
go over some.
Yeah, we got
Chipotle mayonnaise.
we got Chipotle mayonnaise. We have a classic mayonnaise, avocado oil mayonnaise. We even make an organic classic mayonnaise
With sunflower oil or something like that.
that
isn't it?
it's organic sunflower oil. Yeah. We make mustard. So we make a yellow mustard. We make a honey mustard. We make a Dijon mustard. We make a spicy brown mustard, which I know is one of your
Yep,
favorites.
for the
One of my
pretzels.
favorites too.
Yep.
We make a Dijonaise, which is like a mixture between a mustard and a mayonnaise. It's kind of creamy. And then we have
Special sauce.
special sauce.
What made you
Exactly.
make the special sauce?
Well, special sauce is it was one of those things that's in people's consciousness and in their minds from their experience at restaurants, right? So if you go to Shake Shack, there's Shack sauce. In-N-Out has their spread. McDonald's has their special sauce, and people love that. But you can't really find that in grocery stores. So we wanted to create this, thing that people know culinarily, but want to experience again with clean ingredients in a context that they can eat it at home. So that was the thinking behind that, and that's phenomenal for us. People love that product.
Is that one of the big sellers?
Yeah, definitely. And then we just came out with a line of ranch dressings as well. So we've got a classic ranch and then a buffalo ranch. We've got an avocado ranch, and then we also have a pizza ranch,
What?
which I want you to try. Yeah,
Now
it's got the same. It's got the same seasonings that you'd find in a pizzeria. So it's got oregano in it. It's got a little bit of fennel. It's got red pepper flakes, and then it's dairy free. So instead of Parmesan, we use nutritional yeast.
I got to check this out.
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
But I wanted you to run it down because I want internet's, people, I feel like we live in a world where people get in where they fit in. And I think you guys have.
Tell me what that means.
Well, I like that. I like the
Yeah.
way you turn it around on me. So, sometimes we may say like, ketchup. And they're like, okay, I don't mess with ketchup. And want to walk out the door. Hold up one second. Don't walk out the door yet. Maybe something we're saying here is something that you fuck with. And
Yeah.
I want you to go check it out because
Yeah.
I believe in the brand.
Yeah.
I believe in the brand, and I think that I feel like it's wide enough for somebody to find something they like.
You want to have as many discovery points as possible.
Sure.
Right? Because someone might say, I don't do ketchup. And so they'll never try your ketchup unless they first try the Chipotle mayonnaise. And they go, oh, man, that's the best Chipotle mayonnaise I've ever had. Maybe
Sure.
the ketchup is actually worth trying.
Sure.
You win a little bit of trust, and then people come into the rest of the products that we make. So that is very important.
What was the first store you ever got into?
First store was, I would say the first store of note was Dean and DeLuca.
Nice. And
Yeah.
how does something like that happen?
We were really lucky to have someone that was more or less like a forager for them discover us through a friend and at the Fancy Food Show, which is a big trade show where all the different food companies that do premium and specialty products kind of show their wares. And she took a liking to us and was able to really be an advocate for us, get behind us, and that was a really important moment for us. And also, Murray's Cheese was another really amazing early one that was super strong for us. And at that point we were like delivering product via UPS. So we didn't even have any distributors or delivering it by hand, and I love that. I mean, I love doing the demos, going to these random stores that no one had ever heard of and doing a demo there and, actually having the experience of
Sure.
talking to people.
Sure. And
Because
seeing
if
their
you don't
response.
do that, then you will never be able to listen to customers and scale.
Yeah. What about Whole Foods? How did that happen? Was that your biggest one? The first big one?
Yeah. That Williams-Sonoma
Okay.
was also big, but Whole Foods, retailers have a process. Like they have a period of time where they review new products in a certain category. And then a few months later, they'll tell you if you got in or not. And then a few months later, they'll actually reset the shelves. And they only do that per category about once a year. So we had to, go through the process, do the application. It's like applying for college or something like that with all the all the work, presentations and forms and things like that. And that is what allowed us to get in there. And again, a lot of it is through having a compelling product, but it's also making sure that you're organized and that you're sending messages to the right people.
When did you realize?
It's a process. It's a
Yeah,
very
it is.
long process.
It's good things are a process, man.
Yeah.
Big things like you said, you wanted to make a significant change. You want to be involved in something.
Yeah.
That's a process.
It's a process. And right now, what's very interesting is how the internet is changing so much about how to get a product to market. Now, not every product works on e-commerce and online for a number of different reasons. But if you have the right fit, you don't necessarily need to go through that retailer process, right? You can set up your own website, or you can set up a Kickstarter. You can set up your own Amazon seller page, and you can start whipping things up and selling things at any time scale you
Sure.
want. Harder to get scale, and it's harder to bring people, to actually treat it as a destination. But if you really solve a problem and you have something really interesting, the internet has never, it's never been as viable a channel for products as it is now.
When did you get to a point where you were like, holy shit, we're taking off? Do you remember? Did you even embrace that moment?
It's really hard to get that kind of emotional perspective, because I felt like it's always like it was like never enough, And then it was always simultaneously like, oh my God, I can't believe we've gotten here. And there's so much gratitude to it. I will say that I would like probably for the first 2-3 years in my head, I was like, yeah, but we're still probably going to fail. We're still probably going to fail. And I don't think that's healthy, but it was natural for me. And then at some point, I think when we really started to, when we came out with the mayonnaise and we started to see the growth that created and the fact that worked for us, that's when I was like, okay, this thing is not going to zero. We're going to have something there.
Sure. How hard is it to like keep your recipes hidden? It's funny, but I saw something somewhere that said Coca-Cola had their recipe somewhere in a private room that only 3 people were allowed access to. What lens do you go to keep your recipe hidden?
Yeah. So our recipes are a trade secret. At the same time, I don't think that if we were to release those recipes, we'd be in trouble. And here's why. Is because the product itself is important, but there's so much other complexity that goes into one, actually making the product, and then 2, the brand, the reputation, marketing, communicating, and selling the product. And if you're a decent chef, you could reverse engineer our ingredients, and you could reverse engineer our taste and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a ticket to our customers and a ticket to that success, because otherwise, what is Sir Kensington's worth and what does it mean, right?
Sure.
And so it's very important to contractually own and protect that property. And with the manufacturing partners we have, they're only allowed to make that recipe for us. They can't make it for themselves or for anyone else. And that's of course under contract. But we don't do anything crazy like, lock and key.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's probably for Coca-Cola. I'm sure they're paranoid, et cetera, but it's probably more of a great story than anything.
I wonder who those 3 people are. That's what I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Like how were you granted access to that room? You know what I mean? It's just curiosity, man.
Yeah.
Recently, you guys were able to be acquired by a monster called Unilever, right?
Well, they're a big company.
Yeah. I mean, a monster, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that?
A gentle monster.
Yeah. The story, before we even get into that, and what's the correct pronunciation? Unilever, right? Unilever.
Unilever.
Yeah, Unilever. I want to make sure because people will make fun of me, but I pronounce things sometimes wrong.
No, it's a global company. I've heard it in probably 100 different accents.
Yeah. So the before we get into them acquiring you, which is amazing for somebody who started this company having no idea what it could be. The story that I love is that supposedly Heinz was supposed to buy Unilever for like billions of dollars, and then
I think it was $143 billion.
What the fuck?
Something like that. Yeah.
And explain what happened. And they just turn around and
Well, so this is also we're living in a fascinating time economically because interest rates are cheap, so people can borrow money to buy companies, right, and to create leverage, and they can do that in tremendous scale. And also, food companies in America the big ones at least, have generally stagnated in terms of growth because millennials and people these days, young people especially that are defining the market, they have tastes that are more geared towards natural products and local products and niche things and global foods or quote unquote ethnic foods that are not necessarily sold by these big companies.
Sure.
And so when you have companies like that aren't growing as aggressively, then the way that companies create growth is by buying other companies. And so there's a big private equity group that controls and has rolled up and combined Kraft and Heinz, and they're acquisitive. They want to buy more companies. And so they made a bid to acquire Unilever, and it was ultimately rebuffed. And Unilever was able to essentially convince their shareholders, rightfully so, that it was better off in the hands of the current management than it would be in the hands of this future buyer.
Could you let people know what does Unilever own? Like, don't they own like Hellmann's mayonnaise?
They do.
Who else?
They own Hellmann's mayonnaise. They own Dove soap.
Wow. Okay.
They own Seventh Generation, which is obviously green cleaning products. Mm-hmm. They own Ben and Jerry's.
Look at holy shit.
Yeah, and they've owned them for close to 20 years now.
It's a monster.
They own Breyer's ice cream. They own Talenti gelato. They have a big ice cream business. They own Magnum. If you've ever had those, bars, or now pints, and Knorr soup stock, Knorr, sure. That soup stock that is just ubiquitous. That's one of their biggest brands globally. And Unilever, over 60% of their sales actually come from emerging markets outside of U.S. and Europe. And they're a company with over 140 years of heritage as a company that actually started in England in the late 1800s with a new way to make soap. A way to make soap from, instead of using beef tallow and animal fats, they were able to create a new process for making soap from plant oils, which was actually more hygienic and safer. And and this was at a time where health and understanding of bacteria was actually quite nascent. And at that time, not all the doctors, even in Europe, would even wash their hands. And so they were able to educate about bacteria and about cleanliness and about safety at the same time that they were able to grow a business on the back of this innovative product. And they were able to do so in a way that really treated their employees right, building a town for them, building houses, schools, medical facilities for them, when most companies had sweatshops,
sure,
right, and child labor. And so they, from the very beginning have been about what does it mean to do good business and govern your business, not just with business acumen, but actually with a conscience. And for us, in the commitment that they have made to companies like Ben and Jerry's and to Seventh Generation, when the time came and when we began to talk to them, that's actually why we had any confidence or excitement about the partnership, was because we knew that this was a company that was going to treat the legacy right, and that wasn't going to just see this as something that was transactional,
Sure.
not just as a product to have the sales maximized and the cost minimized, but actually something that literally becomes part of people's bodies.
Sure.
Right?
Respect integrity.
Yeah, respect the integrity of it. And integrity, I mean, that's really the key word here.
Yeah. How does that even happen? Like, what did you get, an email? Like I say, hey, we're looking to, like, how does that even happen for somebody like, because mind you, there's people listening that may have small, on a small scale, different companies or different things. Like, you're running your company, you're in multiple stores, a lot of stores all over the world.
Yeah.
You're living your life. And
yeah, at the time, our business was not for sale, right? We weren't planning to sell the business at that point, and we really had our heads down and we were growing it. And we took just an informational meeting with them, kind of a social meeting to get to know them, not thinking that it would turn into anything that was interesting. And then that's when we really started learning about what it is, what they cared about, how they really governed their business by values, the work that they had done with these other great brands, and with a focus on sustainability and a focus on wellness, and they developed over time an interest in us. And really, they said, call us when you want a megaphone. Right? When you want to take what you do, which is amazing and relatively small, and you want to tell the world about it and you want it to grow, then, perhaps we can help with that. And so over time, we got to know them more and more, and ultimately recognized that it was the right partner, and probably the only partner that frankly would be a good long-term home for our business and treat it right. And, and so the time was right and the partner was right, and that's how we made the decision.
how long does it take to make a decision like that?
There's no set. I mean, every business is different, right? Every business culture is different, and every business is different. And so if you have a business of scale and you run a process through an investment bank or something like that, then you set it on a schedule. But maybe you're dealing with a Japanese or Korean company that's going to want to kick the tires for a year and a half, right? Or maybe you're dealing with a high pressure tech company situation where something gets, moved in a month and a half. So for us, it was in between those two periods of time. But there's no set rules for it, no set date.
You guys are also, aren't you in hotels and
Yeah.
or first class?
That's right. Yeah. Well, we're on United Airlines. So any domestic flight you take on United, you can get a burger with Sir Kensington's.
What?
Yeah.
How the fuck does that happen?
They were looking for a New York focused condiment, actually, which we're obviously here local in New York, and they built this burger around it, and it was opportunities come to you, and then out of the blue sometimes, and then with our killer team, we were able to develop those relationships and grow the partnership. And hotels are indeed an important place for us. From Chateau Marmont in LA, where a lot of people discover it, to, the Peninsula here in New York, SLS in Vegas, Miami, great places.
And then you're also available in like Publix, right? And Kroger's,
grocery stores, and
nationwide.
Well, for retailers that are nationwide, nationwide, and we are. We just actually began working with Target and Walmart. And we're not nationwide there, but we are in a significant selection of their higher end stores.
I don't know what you could go over as far as money wise, but the Chicago Tribune reported that Unilever bought you guys for $140 million. I mean, the only thing I have to say about that is, from a kid who picked up a video camera and was filming in his parents' house, making videos and editing and just somebody who probably was just trying to figure out where he wanted in life. And you said something to me that really stuck out. You said that you wanted to be involved in something that made a significant mark, like something that was that could stand its test of time. That's what I took from it. It's not always about money, but something like that is powerful.
Well, yeah, I mean, we we didn't disclose the terms of the deal, so I can't comment on that.
It's okay.
At the same time, money is just one measure of impact and scale.
Sure.
And I have to say we're still just getting started.
Sure.
And I think that metric is one way to measure it, but our actual customers wouldn't care about that number.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And what's important for us is actually how people are experiencing this, how they're telling the story, and how we can educate and entertain and bring people into this greater world of food.
Sure.
And bring them into the superpowers of food.
I do believe the people who were messing with your brand from the beginning to see you guys sold for a significant amount actually probably care about that.
Yeah, I think that for the early adopters and the people that are like really part of the tribe, they're
probably like,
really,
look at these guys.
Thrilled, and it's great to continue to have their support. But I had no idea that I would grow a business like this, and I feel incredibly grateful for all the people that have made it happen throughout the way, because it's frankly not about my talent.
Sure.
I'm just a conduit, and at best I'm a B+ listener,
sure.
right? Trying to be an A- listener, and that's really the skill that and teamwork makes the dream work. Being able to organize your time and stay focused on your goals, right? That's what it takes.
Over the years, have you ever had any mentors or coaches that
I have?
yeah.
I've had a couple of great coaches and mentors. Actually, a couple years ago, I hired a leadership coach.
Really?
Yeah, and it was recommended to me by one of the founders of Sweetgreen, who had a really, really good experience with him. And he was really perfect for me. I think it's super important, as I think if you're leader or really anyone, to have someone that you can open up to and that can coach you is incredibly important. And for me, that happened to be a coach. I think for others, it's important to have the ears of friends, and opening up to people is something that is takes a little bit of vulnerability, but it's important to do. I've also had like a yogi, someone that mostly we do a little bit of physical work, but we're mostly just talking, and that was also very powerful for me as well. I think you'd like him.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Do you still talk to him?
Yeah, I still talk to him. I don't have like regular sessions with him, but we chat. We send each other like inspirational
That's interesting.
stuff.
Maybe I want to sit down with somebody like that one day, because even just on the show, maybe because that's interesting. That that's a business. That you get called upon. That you actually it does work. I think sometimes we live in a world where if you don't get to experience or hear of this, you don't know of it.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that's special. But is it true they used to carry ketchup in the early days to restaurants and put it on the tables?
Oh sure, yeah, certainly.
We just leave it there, or just?
I mean, we would go and enjoy it, and maybe make it visible, but not necessarily like in mass. But we would definitely encourage, and some of our fans do bring the product out to restaurants that don't serve it there. I mean, I saw an Instagram story from one of our super fans who brought the ranch dressing to a pizza place and put it all over the pizza.
Yeah, I like that.
And BYOR, bring your own ranch.
The guy I was telling you about, Ikram, the co-founder of Venmo, he used to go to like places and say, "Hey, I'm gonna pay for your food," and they're like, "Dude, why are you picking up my?" He's like, "If you want." He's like, you could download this app, you could Venmo me back the money. And they're like, yeah. He's like, all right, don't worry about it. The meal's on me. But it took a while for him. He started to offer to pay for people's things by Venmo, by paying for other people's meals in a restaurant. It was kind of like creepy.
I'm amazed
and
that he
weird.
would do it even if they didn't download it. I feel like
What
a giver.
I guess chalk that up to marketing dollars.
I mean, you got to try everything, right? At the early stage, you have to try absolutely everything.
Your journey, it's funny because your journey is, special. And I say this to certain people because it's true, but it's just really beginning. I'm sure that you've been able to do some things for yourself over the years. Is there something significant that you felt that you were able to buy or do that you celebrated? Because I feel like I don't know if you celebrated, these milestones. Do you feel that way?
Certainly I celebrated them.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I love to celebrate.
Okay. This is what I like.
I love to celebrate.
You got the champagne out. Mimosas are on deck.
I'm not buying things to celebrate, and I think that a couple things. I mean, one is, I love to host dinner parties and treat people to dinner, treat people to food, and create these gatherings. And I think it's important to make space for that. I think one of the big celebrations is that there's the scarcity mindset and there's the abundance mindset. And the scarcity mindset is there's never enough. I don't have enough. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough respect. Our team's not big enough. We don't have the tools to do this. And then there's the abundance mindset, which will be the universe will provide. We have what we need. We have a great team that can grow. We've got exactly what it takes to get where we want to go. And we actually have, and I personally have the ability to take some time in my day, to take some time off, to take time to take a break, right? To take time to change the tape in my head and meet someone for a coffee or something like that. And if you're too much in the abundance mindset, then your head will be in the clouds. And if you're too much in the scarcity mindset, then you're living in fear all the time. And I have an 18-month-old son now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And he was born just a couple of months before the acquisition. And I think part of me was probably illogically saying like, oh my God, I've got a kid coming. Like, how am I going to eventually pay for college? And what if we have two of them? And, preschools and schools so expensive in New York City. And, all these kind of questions of scarcity. And I think that I probably didn't need the selling the business to get there. But after I sold the business, I was able to say I'm okay with being able to provide for my family, for this child. And so it wasn't about living a different lifestyle at all. It was really about the mental switch in my head about going from scarcity to abundance. But I think is just a figment of the imagination, because it's your circumstances should not define your mindset of scarcity or abundance. And I think
just drop the gem.
Of course, there are extreme cases, right? But I think that I've definitely witnessed people that are able to change their mindset without a change in external circumstances, and I think that takes a lot of mindfulness and intentionality, and it takes perspective and it takes experience. But for me, I think the biggest celebration that I had was being able to say, I'm going to fully embrace and really love every bit of having this child in my life, and not feel like I'm inadequate in being able to provide.
That's special.
Now the trick is providing the time, right? My own time, and that's the big trick.
And that's what we talk about.
Presence over presence.
There we go. And I'm glad you're adopted that lifestyle.
I'm on the wagon.
I appreciate you, my man.
Yeah.
Listen, what's next for Sir Kensingtons? What's on deck?
Yeah. Well, we are so nascent kind of in being known. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have never heard of us before, and that's going to change in the next couple of years.
Sure.
And so what's next for us is really, bringing more excellence to what we do, and to being in more grocery stores, working with more restaurants, coming out with more exciting and interesting products. And I can't talk too much about exactly what those are.
Only three people know about it?
More like 30, but yeah. It's about how do we stretch outside of our comfort zone and create things that are dramatically different, or that solve either problems for people or are filling in gaps in the market for better food that are currently underserved. So how do we bring integrity and charm to ordinary and overlooked food in categories that we haven't yet? Sure.
What's next for you also? You got any things you're going to be doing on the side? Is there any new businesses? Is there any new investments that you suggest? Or?
Well, I certainly no investments I suggest. I'm not licensed to do that. But, I really love teaching and coaching myself. Mm-hmm. And so, again, there's so many interesting companies out there right now that I want to be really selective, but have an opportunity to take some time to mentor and nurture other entrepreneurs that I share an ethos with, and that are making a change in the industries or in the societies that they're participating in, or that they're contributing to. So for me, I want to really flex that muscle so that I can kind of give the gifts that I've received from mentors and from investors.
You dropped a lot of gems this episode. I don't know if you even know, but when you listen back, you'll realize. Because sometimes when we're doing it, you don't realize it. It's kind of like your journey. You don't realize how special it is until you start telling it, or until somebody else listens to it, because you're living it, right? Keep in mind, young guy with a startup, or even somebody who, whatever it is, somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur struggling, what's some advice you would give them?
Advice to an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
I think, number one is bias towards action is do, just start building something and just start testing it out and see what people think of it. That's step one. And step two is have a devotion to your long-term vision, but respond to people's feedback and be open to hearing people's feedback. When we started, our ketchup was like chunky and it was more brown and it tasted really earthy. We had different ingredients in it. And if we had just like stuck to our vision like an artist, then we would really only be making something for ourselves. An artist only makes something for themselves. A prostitute only does something for money, right? So where do you find the balance between artist and prostitute? Craftsman. I think as an entrepreneur, you have to think about, how do I be a craftsman and find the balance between doing something just for money and doing something for myself and for the art of it. And what a craftsman does is they hone what they do to provide value, to create something that solves someone's problem and that's useful, but they do it with care and they do it with finesse and they do it with artistry and an attention to detail, something that they can be proud of. I think that's something that the Japanese businesses and Scandinavian businesses do especially well. But I think that's the mentor that the model that I would suggest for an entrepreneur is, don't do just something to get rich, and don't just do something for your own enjoyment and entertainment. Create something that's both useful and also is something you're proud of. And you got to be open to feedback in order to doing that.
Got to be open-minded.
Yeah.
Any books you suggest before you go?
Oh man, I love reading.
No.
So
hit 'em with.
So I mean, have you read *Sapiens*?
No.
Probably first and foremost book I would recommend people read is *Sapiens* by Noah Yuval Harari, which is about how the fundamental difference from other species that human beings have is the ability to tell and understand stories. And we have organized our society around stories. Political boundaries on a map, those are just stories that we believe, right? The brand of Sir Kensingtons, right, or the brand of anything, that is really just a story that people believe, And legal contracts, money, all these things are stories. So I would highly recommend that, because that's a very powerful book if you can kind of put some of that to work. I'm reading the Theranos book right now, Bad Blood, which is obviously riveting and is a tale of intrigue. Can't put that one down. But that's obviously a little salacious. What other great? Oh, and also, it really struck me when Anthony Bourdain passed away. And I think he was someone that is, in the world of food, but really in the world of culture, in the world of people and ideas, he was someone that taught Americans not to be afraid of the outside world. And he was also able to, teach the outside world not to be afraid of Americans in the experiences that he had. And I think he lived incredibly without fear and lived, brilliantly, and was really important for shaping America's curiosity in global food. I recommend Kitchen Confidential, his first book. Yeah. Beautifully done. And then if you like that, Medium Raw, another one of his books, is another great one. So I think that's a collection of book I would highly recommend.
Sir Kensington on Instagram, sirkensington.com.
Sir Kensingtons.
Sir Kensingtons.
Sir Kensingtons on Instagram, and sirkensingtons.com.
And at probably mostly all your grocery places that you go and shop.
Anywhere fine groceries are sold.
Internets, listen, let me tell you something. First off, I really enjoyed you being here, Scott. More importantly, I thank you for bringing, flavor into condiments.
My
for
pleasure.
Kind of reviving them, or should I say evolving them, So thank you for that, Internet's the one and only Scott Norton.
Thank you, Premium Pete.
Take care, buddy. Internets, if you enjoyed that episode, I want you to email me at thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com. Again, that's email is thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com. Let me know what you thought. And listen, all my advertisers out there, all my big businesses, my small businesses, whoever, a friend, a store, you want to advertise on the Premium Pete Show? Email me at thepremiumpeteshow@gmail.com and let's get working. Okay? Make sure you subscribe, rate, leave a comment on all streaming platforms of the podcast. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and we'll see you next episode. Cheers.